Welcome to a very special election week, episode number 3 of Find the Helpers, the name of my podcast and my book based off the famous quote from Mr. Rogers, where he talks about his mother always saying to him, whenever there are terrible things happening in the world, always look to the helpers, the policemen, the firemen. I would also add in my friends, the helpers, because as long as there are helpers, there is hope. And with that, I would like to welcome my special helpers today. First, my dear friend, Shelly Tygielski. Shelly, I got to know you, I think, was it days or weeks after Parkland, after what happened to Jamie and the other families. I like to say I hate to know people like you, but I'm thankful that I met you and I love you. I'm also thankful that this country has gotten to know you because of you came into my life as a helper. You came into the Parkland community as a helper. And I'm really going to actually ask you to talk more about some of what you've done, because it's not just my family that you've gotten connected to. I'm not surprised that as we all roll through COVID and this pandemic, that you have become such an important person for people who are getting through it, because that's who you are, and so I'm not surprised at all. With that, I also want to introduce another familiar face. And Debra Messing, for years, my wife and I would sit there and we would laugh while we watched you on Will and Grace. I still wish we had the chance to do that, but I guess it was time to end the show last year. Yeah. But, I've also gotten to know you in a somewhat personal way, weirdly, through social media. Yeah. Because we've gotten so deeply connected through this election cycle. And I hope we actually will take some time to talk about that today. We're going through some really crazy times, but it's getting to know people like you, who I would call a helper to me, that continue to give me amazing amounts of hope. Before I go forward, I also want to let everyone know that in addition to the amazing things you're doing through this election cycle, you also have a podcast called The Dissenters. And you do it with somebody by the name of, and I want to make sure I get this name right, Mandana Dayani?
Mandana Dayani.
All right, good. And what I love about your podcast is you focus on heroes, and you highlight heroes around the country and people who do a really amazing things. And what I love about that is it's often the heroes and the helpers who are the same people. And I think about so many of the people who I wrote about in my book who were just helpers, but they were heroes. And in some ways big and in some ways small. And so there's such a connection, I think, between the focus of the work you're doing with your podcast and the work that I'm trying to do with my podcast and my book. And I hope that if together we can get people focusing on heroes and helpers, maybe there's hope that we're going to really get into this better place soon. So with that, I asked you both to come on here today to talk about Pandemic of Love. But before I do that, I want to ask you both just to maybe talk a little bit about your connection, because you knew each other before you started Pandemic of Love. I'm not surprised that you've actually been helpful and supportive of Shelly with Pandemic of Love, but I want to give you both a chance to talk about that. Shelly?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us on. I'm really excited to be here with my favorite people. It's an honor. It really is. I first of all, I want to say I love you, Debra, so much for your generosity and your open heart and your willingness to just leap in with your heart and, just amplify different ways that people can cling on to hope, get tangible help is just so inspiring. It really is. You absolutely have kept me going, at moments where even I have wanted to break, because it's been a really tough go for the last several months. Debra and I feel like Debra and I were connected probably originally through my connection with Chelsea Handler. I feel like that was maybe how we originally got connected, through social media.
Yes.
And it was amazing because the very first post that I put up with the original Pandemic of Love video, which was just like it wasn't even called Pandemic of Love. It was just like a 40-second video with 2 links. And it was really meant to just serve our South Florida community, Fred, that was kind of the realm or the scope of what I was imagining that I was putting together. And Debra saw it on her feed, and without hesitation, because that's the way Debra is, and that's what I've learned, she just shared it.
Sure.
And not only did she share it, but she talked about it and she promoted it on different platforms. And then she recruited a lot of her friends and influencers and individuals that she's worked with who have the means to be generous, and said, donate, here's the link. And because of them, we were able to really help a lot of struggling families with things like funerals and things like, utility payments and groceries and now rent relief. But really that, the connection has always been, on social media. And then Debra surprised me. I think it was in April. We were texting each other back and forth. And I said, I'm about to light the Shabbat candles. Do you want to light the Shabbat candles with me? And she actually FaceTimed me, and we lit the Shabbat candles together. We like just,
I love that.
And that's when we fell in love. I think. That's when we fell in love.
I love that.
Yeah, no, it's true. I saw, it's amazing how much good social media has done just in seeing how we've connected. I saw Chelsea was with Shelly somewhere in some kitchen somewhere doing something incredible. And I was like, who's this woman? And so I just went to her feed, and I realized that she was a helper and that she was really doing beautiful things. And so I just started following her. And as soon as I saw that what she was creating, I was absolutely blown away, because it's one thing to look around you and to be overwhelmed by the suffering around you and feel empathy and feel like, okay, I have this urge to do something. It's a completely different thing for you to actually build an infrastructure and sit at your kitchen table for 18 hours a day and build this mechanism by which people who have can give to people who need. And it sounds like such an obvious, simple concept, but it's not. I've never seen it done before. And Shelly, you just have to talk about the numbers of how quickly it exploded.
Yeah.
And I want to say something, because, listen, there is so much similarity between the aftermath of COVID and the aftermath of gun violence in so many ways. And like you mentioned, planning a funeral, but when you have all this loss, and it's not just loss of people, it is loss of economic stability and everything else, the world starts to spin for you. And I remember the world spinning for me after Jamie was killed, but I also remember those who were there saying, I'm here for you. Let me help you with this. Let me make sure you've got this. And I do want you to talk about the numbers, and I want you to be really specific also about what it is Pandemic of Love does, because we have all of these American families now who the world is spinning for them, and there you are, with Pandemic of Love. And I hope whoever watches this, now reaches out if they need it, because you're doing this amazing work that people may not know about. So yeah, let's hear it.
Well, Fred, in your book, you mentioned another Mr. Rogers quote, which I love, which is that grief is just love with nowhere to go. And so as somebody who teaches meditation and is a mindfulness teacher, we work towards this default mode of choosing love over fear, right?
Yeah.
Because we're born into love, but fear is something that's learned as we continue to grow and live in this world, right? But we're born into love. That's like a natural, innate feeling that we have. Fear has to be learned. And so whether it's the aftermath of a mass shooting or gun violence or a death due to a pandemic, there's all of this love that still exists with nowhere to go. How do we channel that collectively as a society? How do we create mechanisms by which people can then take all of that energy that we have, right? Similar to what we're doing now with our activism, right? For the upcoming election. Like, we're channeling rage and anger and frustration, and we can wallow in it, or we can just take that energy and then actually use it for good. And so I feel like, that same energy that really came to me in a moment of despair, looking at my social media feed, talking to the individuals in our community that were worried about how they were going to feed their kids, while they were sheltering in home, how they were going to keep the lights on. These are individuals that barely make it through the week every week, basic, essential needs that I think many of us take for granted. And so, the idea was that the premise really of Pandemic of Love has always been this kind of mantra that I've lived with for a really long time, which is enough is a feast. Enough is a feast. If we can all just have enough and all sort of be at that equitable, level playing field, what could we accomplish? Can we level that playing field, right? How much does a person really need? But yet somebody who doesn't have enough just needs those basic, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They need those basic needs met. So that's kind of where the impetus of all of this came from. It came out of despair. And my default mode is just like showing up. When I'm in despair, I just try to show up and just say, like, what?
I know you were there for me. And
but that's
a lot of people.
And I think what happens when we show up in life, the most important thing, and I tell this to my son all the time, the most important thing you can do in life is show up. The rest kind of like falls into place. You figure things out. But showing up sometimes is like the hardest thing to do, for a lot of different people. So that was the mechanism of all this. This was the impetus, and the platform just formed to kind of give people a way to not despair, but to actually, in a very tangible way, be able to help people in their community and get to enough. And what happened ultimately was really beautiful, because by virtue of people like Debra posting and sharing and other individuals sharing, it kept growing and expanding, just like love does, right? It just kindness, hope, all these wonderfully viral things that are positive in the world just kept expanding out. And thousands and then hundreds of thousands of individuals started to sign up to be connected. And the beautiful byproduct of helping people in this manner directly, right? Because we're not a nonprofit, we're a nonprofit disruptor. There is no 501c3 for Pandemic of Love. We don't have a Pandemic of Love bank account. We never plan on having one. Wow. Is the fact that we connect the donor directly with the person in need. And what has to happen for the connection for that monetary exchange or that bill to be paid or that gift card to a supermarket to be, delivered, is that they have to have a human connection. They have to talk to each other.
So you're building relationships while you help people.
Exactly.
I love that.
So now you have a moment in time of disconnection where we're creating human connections. And then on top of it, it gives the opportunity, especially for the donor, to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes that they may never have met, that they may never have interacted with, that they may never have had an opportunity to look at the world through their lens. And for the person in need, it's so beautiful because I can't even tell you how many times I've heard people say things like, when you just simply ask, how can I help you? Or how are you doing? People are like taken aback because they're like, wow, nobody's asked me that for a really long time, and it's coming from a stranger, right? So that's really the beautiful byproduct of what's happened. And where we are today is that we've matched over 700,000 individuals. And that's accounted for over $42 million in direct transactions between donor and recipient. And when you think about that number, it's astronomical, but I want to break it down for you mathematically because it's really also not. And the reason I want to just make sure that I highlight this is because people think $42 million, wow, that's a big number. 700,000, that's a big number. But we got there incrementally. Because the average transaction is only $135 when you factor it out mathematically, which is really, I think, a testament to the fact that if we all just do little things, little acts of kindness, the aggregate of that is so huge. The impact is so huge.
So as an example of something that you've done, something not huge, but it doesn't need to be huge to be meaningful. I mean, go ahead.
I'd love to. The thing that I think makes this Pandemic of Love so extraordinary is we all have an experience of seeing a nonprofit, seeing people in need, and they're saying, please donate. And so we push the button and we donate whatever we can. And we feel good, but it's over. That transaction is over. We don't really have any idea how it's being used. The game changer here is that what Shelly has set up is you sign up and she says, what would you like to help with? And you check off groceries, a prescription that needs to be filled, rent, utilities, and then you get to, funeral expenses. And you can determine exactly what and how much you want to give to. And all of a sudden, you have a visual. And it becomes very, very real to you how much that money has such a life-changing impact for people in need. Mm-hmm. And it makes you want to come back and do more.
Well, and sadly, because of the way this country has managed this pandemic, the need for it is not going to go away. In fact, it's going to get worse. We're seeing that right now. The longer this goes on, I think the needs of people are going to expand. Earlier on in this pandemic, it may have just been groceries, mm-hmm. utilities, but we're now at that place where people are going to start fearing losing homes, cars. And so is Pandemic of Love able to help, not just in those little ways, but is there opportunities to really help people to much bigger constraints?
Yeah, so it's really amazing because, so when I say we, it's really important to highlight that we have over 1,000 volunteers, and we now have over 220 chapters around the country and in the world. And our chapter leaders and their volunteers are amazing. They all bring something to the table. We all share best practices. We've become, I want to say, a sisterhood, because 99% of our volunteers are women.
The men are not stepping up, huh?
I don't know. I don't know what's going on there, but I want to say I'm surprised.
Caretakers. Women are natural caretakers.
Yeah. But listen, I have that same frustration in the world of gun violence.
Yeah.
Because for the most part, who is it that's stepping up? It's the moms and it's the kids.
Yeah.
Now, Shelly, you'll remember back in 2018, I tried to start what I call this whole orange wave movement, which was about trying to get dads to do what moms are doing, because dads are supposed to be the protectors. You know, women, the caretakers, we're supposed to be the protectors. And I could not get dads to get as energized as moms and as kids. It is a really troublesome, and I'm not done trying. After this election, I want to do more. I think there's got to be a way to motivate the dads to maybe have a more, I don't know if it's genetic, but just something that says, I got to do more than just show up. I got to go beyond that, you know? So it's something that I intend to pursue, because it's the same thing in gun violence. It's the moms and the kids. And I'm glad the moms and the women are showing up here, but we got to get the men to show up also.
No, I completely agree with you there. I'm incredibly grateful for the ones that have shown up, for sure. The dads that have, and the men that have shown up for the community and their communities. But what I will say is that the women that are part of this incredible sisterhood that we've developed since March, I've not met, maybe just a handful of these women, but like I've not met any of these women in person, and they're a huge part of my life. Like we talk every day. We're on WhatsApp sharing best practices, crowdsourcing for things. And so collectively, what we've been able to do is really pivot every time the needs have changed. You know, like you were saying, Fred, needs have evolved and they've grown and they've expanded. We now have a dedicated rent relief fund that we formed with originally just one family office. So, you know, and then they were able to get other foundations and family offices to understand that this was a really exciting new way to be able to give. You cannot get a tax deduction, but you know where your money is going. So a lot of these organizations who maybe don't care as much about the tax deduction because they're already in a super high bracket are excited about this. So
sometimes you don't need a tax deduction to just do what's right.
Right.
You know.
Exactly. So
I always raise my kids.
We have fun.
My lesson to my kids was always do what's right, not what's easy. And as long as you do what's right, you'll always be able to look back and feel okay about yourself. You know, and people are, and you know, so you're doing what's right, and you got a really special phone call from somebody because of that. You want to talk about that?
Oh my God, it was crazy actually. I was it was like a Sunday, and I got a strange phone call from. Usually, you don't get like telemarketers calling you on a Sunday evening. You know, I was about to hop in the shower, and it was a phone call from like a hidden number, and so I decided to answer, which is very rare for me to do, and it was somebody from Vice President Joe Biden's office, and they said, "Hi, is this Shelly Tygielski? I'm calling from Joe Biden's office." She didn't say Vice President, she said Joe Biden's office. And I was like, "Oh, I've already donated, but thank you so much." I was about to hang up because I'm like, "Why are they calling me?" She's like, "No, we're not calling for donation. I just wanted to know if it was convenient to have Joe and Jill call you within the next hour. And I was like, is this seriously? Like, how'd you get my number? Like, what's going on? And she said, well, somebody in your community told us about what you're doing with Pandemic of Love. And Joe was highlighting individuals who are helping to restore the soul of America. And he wanted to have a conversation with you about what you're doing. And so lo and behold, I couldn't even get to like the living room in time to tell my husband, Jason, like, you're never going to believe who's about to call me, that the phone rang. And we had such a lovely conversation. You know, it was just so heartfelt. And your name came up, Fred. You know, I said, I know Fred. I'm from South Florida. I live in Broward County. And he said some really wonderful things about your relationship as well. But it was
the guy.
So amazing to be. That was like the first time when I actually took a step back, because I was so muddled in like the work, that I took a step back and I took a moment and I said, wow, like, we've done something here that is really incredible and special, you know, and it just made me feel good. And then it was back to work. 5 minutes.
You know, but the accolades haven't stopped, and you're being recognized now by CNN and others. But I know you, and that's not, and Debra knows you, and it's not the reason you do it. It's because you are truly a helper and a hero, you know, to so many. And this country is better because of that. I'm glad that the vice president or next president had a chance to acknowledge you for that. You know, it's so funny. And many people have heard me talk about when he called me for that very first time. And Debra, I don't know if you've heard the story, but it was about 10 days after Jamie was killed. And my phone rang, and similar to you, it was an unrecognizable number. In my case, I didn't answer it. But it was Vice President Biden himself. And he left a message, and he just said who he was, and he's just wanted to reach out. And he said, listen, I'm going to call you back. And he gave me an exact time. He goes, so if you want, just pick up the phone at that time. And he called me back, and we spent about 45 minutes on the phone. And it's so amazing. And I want to pivot a little bit to talk about him, because what a difference, you know, when I tell this story to people. And again, this really, with you and I all over social media, we see this all the time. How many people have said, yeah, he was that way with me, you know, because it's who he is, you know. And Shelly, when I talked about how you stepped up for our local community, and that I wasn't surprised that you did Pandemic because it's who you are, you know, it's not hard to figure people out. This is who he is. Decent, civil, empathetic, a human being. And maybe that's why we're all so committed to him, because that's what we want in our country. You know, this call is proof that it doesn't matter what walk of life you come from, whether it's, just a regular mom and dad community, or the world of entertainment, or the world of politics. We're all human beings striving, hopefully, for the same stuff for those we love. And here we are, 1 week from today. We will wake up the day after the election. Who knows what it's going to feel like? Who knows what it's going to be? But I'm hopeful that we are all going to wake up and be able to exhale and say, President-elect Joe Biden. Debra, can you give some of your feelings on this election, and why, for anyone who hasn't yet voted, why they need to get out there and do it now?
I mean, all you have to do is look out the window and look where we are in our country, with 250,000 people, almost 250,000 people dying, and we're looking at 400,000 by the new year. Our West Coast has been on fire for months. We've had distrust and disinformation. I mean, if you look back 4 years ago, it really, you cannot recognize our country. And that is what has scared me the most and has made me feel such an urgency to vote and to empower people to recognize that their vote is equal with every other American in the country. And it's probably the only thing in our country where everyone is equal. And, you know, I think that 4 years ago, there were a lot of apathetic Americans and people sat out. Yeah. And I think this experiment failed. I think that people were looking for change, and change came, but it wasn't good for our country. And now I think there is just such an obvious hunger for decency and honesty and civility and respectfulness and experience, and someone who is a natural uniter, someone who is respected around the entire globe and has relationships everywhere, and who honestly and authentically believes in the good of human nature in everybody. He is not, you are the other, we are over here. He is the antithesis of that. That's what you're talking about, how he reaches out to anybody who is hurting. And perhaps that comes from how much pain he has suffered in his own personal life. But, you know, what that does is that gives us a leader who can make us feel safe and who we know is going to take action to get us safely back to work and back to school with COVID. Is going to give us, you know, free PPE, quick testing, when vaccines come, free vaccines for everybody. We know that he is going to address things that have been, you know, way too long ignored, you know, inequality in pay, inequality in our judicial system,
violence,
and to really address the catastrophic climate crisis that we are in. Yeah. You know, and I just pray that people, you know, there's probably 90 million people out there who are thinking they're not going to vote. And my plea is to, if you are a progressive, if you are someone who feels like the government doesn't work for you, or that you feel like the government is corrupt, or you feel like the Democrats haven't fought hard enough, what I would like to say is, at this moment, there are 12 bills, progressive bills, sitting on McConnell's desk. And literally, Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats have gotten us right to the precipice. Yeah. And all they need are 4 more senators, and all of that will be passed. So if there's one thing that you are passionate about, whether or not it's election reform or police violence transparency, or equality, or climate change action, there is a bill there for all of that. And just go in and vote for that one thing. You don't have, there's no perfect person, there's no perfect party. There's only a perfect intention. And I believe that Joe Biden has a pure and beautiful, positive intention for every American.
And you know what? Come January, don't we all just want to wake up in the morning and be bored? Don't we?
Yes, I don't want to care about the government.
I just want to be bored. I want to go back to the day where the 3-week story was the tan suit that Barack Obama wore. You know, yes. it is crazy what he has done to our lives. I think this current occupant of the White House has caused Americans to age in dog years. You know?
I'm 120. There's no question.
Yeah. So I just want to go back. I want to be bored. I really do. And I want people to wake up and instead of focusing on the manufactured insanity and chaos and what to do about this lie and what to do about this evil thing, where we actually get back to being Americans who are there for one another,
Yeah.
who can look to something like a pandemic of love and say, that's my place. I'm going to help. Or maybe it's another really worthy, amazing cause, but you're focused on doing good for one another. I do believe that time is coming. I do believe we're going to get there. So, so with that, I typically end my podcast by asking people to tell something that nobody else really knows about you in a public way. And so you can do that, but I think considering the time frame that we're in, with now under a week to election, what I'd ask you to do is maybe just tell the one thing you hope for most after the election.
I hope that when this election is over, there will be a newfound, that there will be a cultural shift around voting and civic engagement. That everybody in America will see voting as something that is not only a duty, but is something worth celebrating. And that there is a newfound commitment to vote every single time there's election.
And I think we're seeing Americans feeling that way as well through this election based upon the numbers.
Yeah.
Listen, we in this country have done a terrible job of voting. Yeah. And I don't mean people who've actually taken the time to vote have done bad intentions, but too few of us have voted. And because too few of us have voted, we've ended up with some really extreme people. When more of us vote, I think we're going to end up with a more pragmatic group of elected people who will do more to help us in this country. And so I'm right on with you, and I love that. You, my dear, you're last.
So one of the signs that I remember the most from March for Our Lives in DC was it was the young girl holding a sign that said, "They buried us, but they didn't know we were seeds."
Oh, wow.
And I love the quote. The quote was from a homosexual Greek poet and philosopher who was actually, I believe, killed for his beliefs at the time, for the way that he chose to live his life. But we're in this dark space right now, and we're in this period of awakening. And I feel like we're sprouting through and kind of breaking through that dark soil. And that, yes, there will be this new order that emerges. And my hope after this election is that the new order is built upon a system of true equity, where the starting line is evened out for every single person in this country. And that when we use the phrase, lift yourself up by your bootstraps, we make sure that every person has a pair of boots first. And so that's my hope.
I love that in so many ways. And I think that's probably the perfect place to end this, to say to both of you, thank you for the next few days. I know in our little social media bubble, I'll be seeing a lot of you. But We have to do this. And so thank you to both of you for everything you both do. Thank you for coming on here with me today. And on to November 3rd. Afterwards, let's all have a Zoom happy hour and drink to hopefully future boredom.
Amen.
So
thank you so much. Thank you so much. This was beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Much love.
Bye.